Oh crap, I forgot to film today's YouTube video. Let me get the light. What's up guys, and welcome back to Tech Planet. Today we're going to be reviewing this garden bed right here. This was sent to me from LandGuard. Let's check it out. Alright, so LandGuard was kind enough to sponsor this video, which is absolutely fantastic because I am building a tissue culture lab, but that's a whole nother video. Let's get back to this one. I have been gardening for the last 3 to 4 years outside. I just have in-ground garden beds at this point, but I am really struggling with creeping Charlie, so I really wanted to try some actual garden beds. For me, it's been a huge problem because the creeping Charlie just finds its way into the gardens all the time. It moves underground, it sprouts up everywhere, and I just cannot keep it at bay, and it drives me insane. So these garden beds are going to be actually really awesome for preventing weeds from getting in there. Now, lucky for me, and I didn't really realize it until more later in this video, and you will see what I'm talking about, but I have piles of stuff all over my property. It's not a very big property, it's just as I cleaned it up when I moved in, I just piled things up and just left it, and that'll be key later. But this is where I want to put the garden bed, so I do have to sort of get this pile of like compost, sticks and everything tilled out a little bit and just see what's underneath and create like an actual spot for these actual beds. Now we are going to be setting up 2 garden beds. These are going to be the 8 foot by 4 feet by 2 feet tall, and we will talk a lot more later about the 2 feet tall thing because it actually is a big deal and you really need to know what you're doing and how you're going to do things before you choose what you would buy. These take up a lot of space, so that's why you can see I'm preparing quite a bit of an area. Each garden bed comes in like a nice flat packaging, so it's quite easy to move. It's not like very big and bulky, and believe it or not, it's not too heavy just given like the nature of the product, so it's pretty easy to move around. Once you get the actual box open, you'll be greeted with a bunch of panels. The nice thing is they're actually pretty darn large. I have seen some other competitor products where you get a bunch of much smaller panels and you end up assembling an awful lot of panels just to get a decent sized bed, but this one the panels are already rather large, which is nice. You also get 2 bags of fasteners and some little cross pulls, at least with the very large beds. In my case, mine is 8 feet long, so it needs like a center brace, but it's a very simple construction and very easy. It comes with 4 corners, which is basically where you're going to start mounting everything up to, and you'll see more about the construction, but basically, if you can screw a nut onto a bolt, then you're all set. That's really all you need to be able to do for this entire construction. Now, I did lay it out just to kind of see how it would look and how long it actually is so I can get my spacing right. Make sure you're not putting these things up against like a wall or something, or you don't have ample space on all 4 sides, because especially with the very large beds, you're going to need some room to actually work in the beds unless you want to crawl into them, like I did. But anyways, make sure you give yourself some room. It just makes life a lot easier. Try not to put them up tight against anything. Now, there's probably a lot of different methods in order to construct this thing properly, but I did find that starting in the corners is easiest. You can just basically build out all 4 corners, and then to get each corner started themselves, you're just going to take your nut and bolt. I get one in the very top, and then I get one in the very bottom, and then I can sort of do all the ones in between. It just makes it a lot easier because, again, this is a long piece of sheet metal, so it's not like this like ultra rigid thing, and it can flop a little bit. So securing the top and bottom first really helps out. This company does advertise their metal being of higher quality. I believe it's galvanized. It's a little thicker than some of the competitors, so it should last pretty long. I'm very curious to see how long it really lasts because I've never used these before, so I'm excited to see kind of what their long-term outlook is. While you are assembling these corners, definitely leave them a little loose at first. Usually when you're assembling many things that have a lot of screws and a lot of holes you have to align, you keep everything a little bit loose, and then once you got everything through the holes and the nuts on the bolts, then you can start to tighten them down. I did notice that if I tighten them down a little too early, even with this project or any project, sometimes it makes it hard to get other holes aligned because it's a little too fixed at the time. So that's just a little hot tip for you. Once you get your first corner done, then you can sort of build off of that to make your like U shape, and then you're going to basically do that another time before you link them up in the middle. It is a little tedious to put all the screws in there, but I'm glad they didn't cheap out and there is a lot because that's going to allow this thing to hold together much better. All the exposed pieces of metal, like when it's all said and done, like the top rims, it's all been like crimped over so you can't get cut on it. It's almost like a soda can, if that makes sense, where the rim has been folded over. So it's a pretty nice product. Well, once you have your both ends finished, then you can start to like join them together. So you're just going to position this thing nice. Try and get it on an even surface. I know it's not easy in like a backyard or something, but it'll make it a lot easier to line up the holes. This kit does come with 2 pretty thick, long, like middle brackets that you're going to put on the very outside, and then you're going to thread the screws in and use the cross beams. Now, another quick tip with these cross beams, because this is flat packed, obviously they're not going to put a 4-foot pole in there because it would get bent or damaged, so you do join them with like a nut in the very middle. I'm not sure if you've all constructed things before that use something similar to this, but this nut is threaded all the way through. So that means you can't just turn it at the end and have it like tighten up both ends. Basically, you're going to want to thread the nut in very nice, and the end nuts, and we're talking about the longer ones, get them all set up on the poles first and then drive the screws from the outside. There is like a certain way you could have these threaded in like other applications where when you spin the middle it sucks both sides in, but that is not the case. So remember to get everything positioned the way you want it beforehand and then put the outer screws in through the bracket into the nuts. It'll save you a lot of time and a lot of headaches. Now, you'll see here that this is the typical construction here where you're going to do every other. However, I'm going to change things up a little bit. I decided I'm going to bury some of mine and put it underground just a little bit in like a trench. One, so it doesn't move with our harsh winters. I'm not sure like if this is the right thing to do or not, so maybe consult other internet information. But I also realized that there is a lot of volume in the 24-inch tall beds, and this is going to be a new topic that you're going to see me talk about a lot. There is a lot of land that needs to go inside of this thing to fill it, and I really underestimated it. So I will end up taking the most bottom beam out. That way I can give it some room to sort of go underground. So yeah, like I just said, because I want to bury this, I do have to mark some lines around the outside so I know where to dig, and I'm just going to dig a trench all the way around. I'm not digging out the inside, it's just I'm making a small, like, almost like a moat, so that way I can drop the outer edge into it, and it will sort of lower the bed in while also securing it really well so it will not move. Once I got it in the actual hole, and again, this is totally optional, you can just set these on the surface of whatever you're doing and just like pile up wood chips on the outside. This is just a personal preference, and I'm sure you have your personal preferences as well. But then I just moved it into the trench, and then it was time to start sort of burying that line. But first, I did want to make sure it is somewhat level. Now, it is not very important for it to be level because your dirt will end up just being level inside of it. But these are aesthetic in my opinion, and if you're going to go with through the trouble of actually setting these up, you want it to look good, so take the time to level it out just a little bit. I mean, it doesn't have to be perfect, but close enough. Here you can see me standing in there, and it really gives you an idea of the real volume that is entailed with this thing. It is crazy. We have a saying here in Wisconsin, and maybe it's a global saying, but my eyes were definitely bigger than my belly, and I got a little greedy when I selected the ones that I wanted to test out. I just did not realize how thick and deep 24 inches really is, and so that means I need a lot of fill. So now comes the part where we actually see that this is quite the perk. At first, what I thought was going to be a nightmare is filling this thing up, and this is where we're going to kind of get on to the whole what is good for you sort of thing. I have a lot of piles on my property that I already mentioned before and that I just don't know how to get rid of. I don't know where to take them because sometimes the dumps charge, and plus my little village doesn't have a dump. So this was the perfect place to do that, and this is actually a method that most people do. You put a lot of sticks and stuff at the very bottom, a lot of wood. You can pretty much get rid of any organic stuff that you just don't want in your yard. Bury it in the bottom because you really only need the top few inches, like probably maybe 6 to 8 inches of actual soil for your like initial plants, and everything else will sort of like break down as time goes on, and you'll have just really beautiful healthy garden beds. So that's exactly what I did. I just filled this with the refuse all across my property. I did add some dirt here and there, some sod, leaves, grass cuttings, anything you can imagine I was just chucking in here. Do be a little careful though when you are putting sticks in there. Try and make sure you chop them up a little bit so they do sit nice and flush at the bottom. You definitely don't want like hundreds of sticks sticking up towards the surface. Again, we're trying to layer the bottom with these sticks, and so that's kind of where you want them to stay. My mother-in-law and father-in-law, you'll see them in and out of the frames. They were also an integral part of this whole setup. This was a tremendous amount of work as well. If you're going to get the 8 foot by 4 foot by 24 inch, be ready for some work. This is not just a simple like 1 hour activity. It takes some time to set up and takes some time to fill and get ready, but it is worth it in the end. But I'm just giving you a warning because you might want to invite some friends over or do some sort of hangout thing so you have a few people to help. Now, originally, I bought these 8 bags from Costco to top this thing off with, and I thought, honestly, I wouldn't even have to just top it off. I thought this would fill it a lot more, but I was sadly mistaken. So definitely try and get your fill from a free place. I know there's a lot out there. Don't do what I did, but this is just what happened. So I took the bags over there, and I ended up using all 8 bags, which was pretty surprising. And the funny thing is, the soil level is still not as high as I technically would like it. However, it is high enough. But yeah, this thing really does eat up the earth. So again, if you're trying to debate on like what you're doing here, don't forget that on top of the cost of the actual bed, there's the cost to fill it. So if you're going to get that 24 inch, while it is very convenient for your back, it is also not as convenient for your wallet. So these are just things that you have to consider. That way you kind of get exactly what you want, and that way you're happy. So really consider what you're thinking when you come with the depth that you're choosing. But yeah, that is just one constructed. So basically, we're going to do the whole thing all over again, assemble it, fill it. The cool thing is this time I did document the pile that I eliminated, and it was pretty fun. When building this one, I didn't really change up any of my strategies. The way I put it together the first time pretty much worked perfectly, so I did exactly the same thing. I dug a trench, that way they sort of match as far as their height's concerned, and they're both aesthetic. I did have some fill from some other areas. I also did a very important thing is I left a pretty good gap between the two. I am going to get some of that like cattle fence and create one of those sort of like tunnel arch things, and I'm going to grow some plants up the arch because I think it's a great way to utilize the space in between the gardens. So I'm really excited for that. But yeah, this thing went together just like the previous one. Very simple, very easy, just takes a little time. I had to get another 8 bags of soil, but this time they were out of the actual outdoor stuff, so now I got like a potting mix. So this will be sort of an interesting experiment in the sense that I've got beds with 2 different toppings, and we'll see which one performs the best over time. But yeah, now that they're both set up, it also was really satisfying to clean my yard. This one corner was just full of refuse and just like all sorts of like organic stuff that just has been laying around, and it was really nice to finally get rid of it and make my property look a little cleaner and less like it looked. All right, now we are down to the fun part, and that is the actual planting. All the hard work is done, and now it is just smooth sailing from here. I did not do any plants from seeds. I actually purchased all these just because it's quite late in the year, had a baby, and there just wasn't time to start seeds. But I got some peppers. I got these like cool little 4-packs that they were selling where it's like one of each variety per pack of like the same sort of thing. So one is cucumbers and zucchinis. Another one is cauliflowers, all different kinds. There's kales and there's tomatoes, and so I thought it would be really nice to use these beds as sort of like a trial for different types of plants, and I can see how they perform and then decide whether I want to mass produce or just keep them in the beds. Like I mentioned earlier before when I was talking about the placement of these things, I did leave quite the gap in between so I can make an arch, and so I'm going to plant the cucumbers and the zucchinis on the edge on both of those planters. I'll do 2 plants in each, and that way once I get the whole grate in there to make the big arch, they can all grow up and look cool just like in the pictures on the internet. At least I hope I can pull that off because I always envy those people. I think it looks awesome. Hopefully I can do it because it will look cool. So yeah, and then the next up, I just put the 4 peppers right in a line because they seem to fit there pretty well. There is no insane rhyme or reason for why I'm placing things. The only one I'll be a little more specific with is the tomatoes just because I want to give them a little more room. But I am just sort of dividing plants out across this bed and the other bed. One of the really surprising things that at least I surprised myself with this was I actually have quite a lot of topsoil on top. I was not able to dig and hit the actual like other stuff I put in there, so I'm really happy with that idea because I think these plants are going to do really good until they get to like the dirt and sticks underneath, and I don't think it's going to pose any issues just because there is a lot of soil on top, and by next year most of it will be converted to just dirt anyway, so it'll be fantastic. And honestly, this is really convenient with this height, so I shouldn't steer you away from the 24-inch ones because it's a lot easier to work in because you're not on your knees or you're not bending your back as bad, and it was actually quite comfortable. So there is quite a positive point to the whole 24-inch tall ones. However, just realize you got to fill them up. Here's my current garden, and there is some genip in here, and this is like a Korean leaf that you like wrap some gepsal on and other things. It's really good. So I'm just plucking them out of the garden. They are actually self-seeded from the previous plant years, and they're amongst the onions and stuff, so I'm just going to move them back to my garden bed. I think it's a perfect thing to move over there, and I'm also going to do it with the lettuce. However, I'm not sure how well the transplanting process will work for the lettuce or these, but we will see as time goes on. But it was nice because I had a little extra room in the one because obviously these are huge beds, so you can fit quite a lot in there. So I'm pretty satisfied with the amount of things I have in here. And again, I can put more specialized plants in here, trial plants, just anything that I don't want to just mass produce like you saw with the garlics and onions. So this is really fantastic. I think these turned out really well, and they have a nice aesthetic to them. Now, they definitely aren't set up the way a lot of the really cool people do, where they have the wood chips all around it. They have more than 2. I think that's really awesome stuff, and eventually I want to get there. But as a start, in my first test with these things, I think these turned out fantastically awesome. They look great, they feel sturdy, and they aren't difficult to set up. I was actually pleased with how they set up, and just everything seemed to go really smooth. Now, it was finally the evening, and so I decided to water these up really nice before going into the house. It's gotten a little darker, you can probably tell. But yeah, these things went up incredibly easily. I really did enjoy the process. I feel like I got a pretty good workout, and it was a lot of fun. And the final product is really awesome. I think it fits the aesthetic of my yard really nicely, and I might add some more as time goes on. I think my only lasting tip is just understand how large these can be, especially when you go for the 2-foot tall ones, and just make sure you're getting what's right for you. Well guys, that pretty much sums up this video. I hope you enjoyed this review and the whole setup. Hopefully you learned a few tips that might help you if you guys get one of these and set one of these up in your yard. Definitely get the 24-inch if you got a bunch of piles of brush or logs or just a lot of extra dirt that you can fill this with. Otherwise, if you're just going to buy dirt for this thing, I would definitely recommend that 12-inch, only because it really does consume a lot of volume. I hope this video helped you out, guys, and as always, may your plants grow strong and healthy. Keep experimenting, and I'll see you next time. I'm going to go back and get some beauty rest.